Buddy, welcome to AITA Pod. I'm Danny Vega, joined today by a very special guest. One of the very first times to the pod. I would say a genuine authority, an expert. I don't know if he'll go that far. We welcome Joe Dillon to the podcast.
Hey, everybody. Nice to have you. Nice to be here, Danny. Thanks. Yeah, really effed that up right away.
Well, Joe, I've been talking about you all week. I'm so excited. I was telling everyone I get all these crazy emails. They're basically spam. I don't know if they're robots. It's always like, a hypnotist or a life coach or a guru on a mountain. And they're like, have them on the podcast.
Nice.
I'm like, it's not really relevant, but I saw your
Yeah,
email come in. Equitable mediation. That's the name of your company. And
yep,
you mediate divorce.
I do.
I mean, just saying it, I'm like, this guy's got to know. This guy's got to know the hardest, the most challenging interpersonal conflicts out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see people make the same mistakes over and over. And you just like, sometimes you just, your workday ends and you're like, oh my God, like, I saw this train coming down the tracks like 300 miles ago. You did not see this. How did you not see this? And that's really part of the maddening part of this, because, as a mediator, you're a neutral third party. So you got to kind of stay hands off, and, you got to just kind of help people forward and guiding them gently. And then there's just sometimes, you just shake your head, you just face plant. What's happening? So, but, as they say, what is it? Not my circus, not my monkeys. So there you go.
Wow, look at you. You even know the Reddit phrases. I love it. Well, we're going to go into the business and ask you lots of questions. I'm super excited for that. But I asked you to bring either an I'm the asshole or an AITA. You haven't told me anything. So I can't wait to hear.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. So one of the bad things about being a mediator, I've been married over 20 years now, and, you've witnessed such terrible behavior a lot of the times that you know exactly what not to do. And so it's really hard to get away with anything at home, because obviously you kind of know what's going on. And something you and I talked about, and I think it'd be very funny to share with the audience, is that my wife and I, my wife is a divorce coach and I'm a divorce mediator. So you would imagine that we fight really nicely, right? And we're also both very clever, and we can outmaneuver each other with our words and negotiate around each other. But we have a very simple rule in our house, and that is, don't be an asshole. I swear to God, not trying to kiss your butt here. That is our number one rule in our marriage. And whenever we get in an argument, you just look at the other person and go, hey, pop quiz, yes or no question. Are you being an asshole? And then usually if somebody says no, kind of you cross the arms, give them a minute, and then it's like, yeah, all right. So, and as you would imagine, my story, one of the stories that commonly happens with me is I come off of a day filled with clients, and, they can really hype you up. And, as a neutral third party, right, you're supposed to be all like distant and, floating above it and, all that. But, you're a person, and they're people too. And sometimes you're really sad for them. Sometimes you're mad at one of them that, like, how could you do this? But at the end of the day, you keep your cool. But as soon as that phone hangs up and you go downstairs, it's not so easy to shake that. So there's one time I come downstairs, and I'm a big baseball fan. So I'm a big Chicago Cubs baseball fan, and I come downstairs and we only have one TV, and my wife is like, I don't know, watching Bridgerton or whatever the heck she's watching. And then I'm like, what are you doing? The game's on. And she's like, well, what are you talking about? It's like, you worked late. It's like 6:30 at night. Like, dude, I'm having dinner, and like, I was waiting around for you. I'm like, come on, let's put on the game. And she's like, what the hell, man? And then I'm like, fine, screw it. And then I just kind of stomp out, and I go outside and read a book or whatever. And then I'm sitting out there for about an hour, and I'm like, yeah, that really wasn't good. That wasn't fair, right? And so sometimes you just using that filter, right? Am I the asshole? Yes or no? Then you come inside, and we have this little joke where one of us will put a hand on the other one. We call it the repair attempt. So it's like a thing therapists tell you to do, right? And we not make fun of it, but we like take it to that nth degree. And so you'll just walk in the room, and like you'll turn your head, and like you'll just put your hand on somebody's shoulder, and you just go, sorry. And then they'll go, so you have anything to say? Or it's like, were you being an asshole? Yes. I didn't hear you. What? And then that breaks the ice, and it helps us move forward. And so that happens a lot, actually, because of what I do professionally, and also my rabid love of baseball. So I tend to, come out of the office all hyped up, and it can be really hard for me to decompress. So sometimes I do kind of sit in here. So I don't get into those kinds of moments any more often than I already do. So that's my kind of personal story and how we sort of go through conflict. And it really does help because it frames it into one real simple thing. It's not trying to prove your point, not trying to be
Right.
smarter than the other person. It's just saying, were you raised by wolves? Like what's your problem here? And it can really help people dial it in and just go cut to the chase. Do we want to move past this argument or do we want to let it hang out there? So that's what we do in our house.
I'm definitely ready to marry a guy like you because you just walked away. She got the TV, like her peace was barely
Right.
threatened. You sat outside and then she just put a hand on you and you're like, "Yeah, I'm an asshole." I mean,
Okay, so yeah.
I'm sure
Because
you
what we see
guys
all day. Yeah.
yeah, you see it all day. And so just so the audience knows, you guys both work for your company, essentially, for your guys'
Yeah.
company. That's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It
So it's
sounds
pretty
like
crazy.
we can hop into, kind of the interview here, but I am very curious. So it sounds like on a day-to-day though, you work in the same organization, but you don't actually work together a whole lot.
Right, correct. Yeah. So my wife is the divorce coach and she handles people one on one. So what she does is she tries to get them to like take the temperature down. So before they get
Mm,
into negotiations with me, they've kind of worked through some stuff and she's not a therapist, but she can help them work through some stuff, develop negotiation strategies, button pushing, right? We're all good. Like think about those friends or those families or those boyfriends or girlfriends you've had or spouses, and they always know how to find that one thing that's really going to piss you
yeah,
off, right? They're just going to get right under your skin. And that's what happens a lot of times with divorcing couples. They know exactly how to push each other's buttons. So Cheryl's really good at saying, "Okay, you know what your buttons are. You know they're going to try and push them. Here's some strategies to like let's make sure that doesn't blow things up." And then by the time they get in with me, I'm always working with the couple, right? So it's me one on two. And
got
with the
it.
couple, then they've already hopefully gotten some coaching from Cheryl. They've got their strategy and they're able to kind of move through the process a lot more efficiently than if they just came in guns ablazing, going at each other. And it helps, quite frankly, it really helps me diffuse a lot of the tension that is really bubbling under the surface. So yeah, so we're same organization co-founders, and then she works with her clients. I work with my clients, but we never work with clients at the same exact time, in real time.
Really cool. Really cool. I mean, I have a million questions, but I want to start with this one because I talked about you all week and almost everyone's response was, how do you even get into something like that? So, yeah, I mean,
Right?
it's so weird. I never even heard of it.
Hell is wrong with you? Yeah. So, my background, as you probably know from reading my bio, I have an MBA in finance and also negotiation. So I'm a professional negotiator, and that is a thing. And so when people think about negotiation, it's a whole skill set. It really is a game. They call it, gamify it, right? It's all game theory. And you really do use certain techniques to get what you want and move conversations in directions that you want. You're using combination of psychology and mathematics and debate and speech and all those things. So combining a negotiation background with a finance background, when you think about that, what is that? That's a divorce, right? When you think about
Mm.
divorce, in a divorce, you've got four main things, right? You got parenting, child support, alimony, and property division. Well, what do three of those four
Wait, can we
things
go a
have in
little
common?
slow? Can we slow through that? I'm not fast
Yeah.
enough. We got
Oh,
parenting,
yeah. Parenting, we got child support, we got alimony, and we got property division,
the big
right?
four. Okay,
The
got it.
big four. Yep. And think about three of those four are financial, right?
Got
Child
it.
support, alimony, property. So when you start thinking about my background, then it starts making sense, right? You say, well, this guy, he's a negotiation guy, he's a money guy. And so I really kind of enjoy helping people negotiate, teaching them the skills too, by the way. We do that as well. We teach them the skills that they can use in their sessions, but they can also use that to go buy a new car or negotiate a raise or do whatever it is because the skills they transfer. So we try to teach them how to have good interactions because, quite frankly, especially if you've got kids, a lot of people forget not going to be husband and wife, still mom and dad, right? So you're still going to have to co parent. And that becomes really important if they're going to break up, not be in the same household, but still need to be on the same page. So we kind of have a multi-purpose service here. In addition to getting a divorce, you'll learn something. So yeah,
And
so pretty odd.
so you're in school, you're learning this stuff, you're learning negotiation, you're learning finance. I'm guessing like
Yep.
your peers at that time went into the business world. Is there a
Yeah.
specific event or a thought that entered your mind where you said, no, I don't want to work with a bunch of guys in suits. I want to work with couples. Is there a genesis there?
I guess I have to give credit to my mother-in-law of all people. So I know, right? You don't really hear that
You
every day.
never
Like, yeah,
hear
my
good
mother-in-law's
things. This is
great.
huge.
This is, you heard it here first, people. Listen to this pod. You will get breaking news. Yeah. So I was in corporate for a short while. And what I was doing was contract negotiation. And then I was having lunch with my mother in law, and I was working at a very large corporation, and I was miserable, right? Because I really wasn't cut out for it. And she's like, I have a friend you should talk to. And she was a mediator for a police union. So the contract before they go on strike and do all that stuff. And I talked to her and I said, well, that sounds really exciting. You've got these people at opposite sides and you're trying to get them to agreement and they're talking about money and all this stuff. And then I sat back and thought about it. Like I said, well, gee, what kind of background do I have? I don't have anything in law enforcement or anything like that. But my parents did litigate their divorce, right? So I'm a child of a divorce
Mm.
and I know how it can go wrong. So in my brain, I thought, well, this is great therapy for me because I get to like undo past wrongs by helping people avoid what happened to me and leverage those skills that I have. And man, I can't believe it's like 28 years of mediation and private practice for coming up on 18. You scratch your head and
Wow.
you look back and it's pretty cool because not that you're happy people get a divorce, but we get Christmas cards from former clients. Like, it's just we have people we're actually friendly with. Like we talk to them, we've seen them, not like as friends, not as clients after their divorce was final. And that really says a lot to how they got through the process. And I hope it says that I'm not an asshole, and that they had some affinity for us and what we did. And I was able to move them forward without, blowing the whole thing up. Like you always hear with the lawyers and all that stuff. It's sad but true. You pull that pin out of that grenade and roll it into the room. There's no getting out of that thing alive after. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, okay, so I think that goes into my question really is, I've never heard of this. I've never heard of
Yeah.
mediation. Of course, I'm not married. So, yeah, I never Googled divorce, fortunately. I mean, I would love to divorce myself at certain times, but
Fair enough. Yeah, I can help with that.
your business essentially lives in this space where it's like it is over because we're not
Yep,
trying to get the couple back together.
correct.
So, yeah, I wonder, who is the typical client, right? Because they're going to be weighing that against the cost of litigating. So, who's your most average meat and potatoes kind of people?
Right. They're the folks who aren't the uber wealthy, but they're the folks who have probably had the middle class upbringing, went to school, worked hard, and now they're like senior managers, directors, maybe entrepreneurs, founders of startups. They're smart enough to know that they don't want to blow it all up with lawyers. And they're patient enough and wise enough to know I can do this with some professional guidance from someone like me. And this is the path forward. I'm not looking to burn down the house. Like you said, Danny, the marriage is over. We acknowledge that. We want to part friends. We want to part on good terms because we have kids and we don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a result, quite frankly, that's going to look pretty identical to the same result you'll get through mediation. And that's a giant misnomer. People think there's some kind of magic rule book. If I hire a lawyer and I go to court, the judge is going to love me, is going to give me everything. And people don't understand. It's wide open. It's Wild West. If you get into a courtroom, a judge might look at you and go, "You look like the guy who cut me off in traffic today." Bah, you lose. Right? They're people. There's no formula. It's all interpretation. So I say, look, empower you, come into mediation, make the decisions that are in your best interest, and let's have a conversation rather than a battle. Those are our typical folks. Those folks who they make that nice money where they're not going to start a charity or have a building named after them, but they work hard. They're good people, good to their kids, and they're smart enough to recognize they don't want to blow this thing up. So those are our best clients and our typical client.
fair to say we're not really talking about middle class. We're going a little higher. It's, people with higher
Mhm.
incomes, maybe top 10%-ish kind of energy.
I think when I got to tell you, people who resonate with us, we'll work with anyone. We have like a sliding scale. So I've worked with guys who are in construction. I worked with a guy who was a part-time bongo player in a band. That guy's not really, he's really not pulling down a lot of cash.
I don't
Okay.
wanna lose my bongos, okay?
Which is a shame because the bongos are awesome. That's the thing, right? We just want people who want this. They resonate with us. You don't have to be uber wealthy. Like I said, we work with people of all stripes. And again, we apply our own philosophy. We will work with you if you're a nice person. We will not work with you. It's real simple. And you'd be surprised. We've had folks, like I said, who just all shapes and sizes. Typically, our clients will skew higher, but by all means, if you're nice, and we customize all of our fees, based on what we think it's going to cost, and then I go, you know what? These guys aren't going to be trouble. I don't have to charge them an arm and a leg. These guys can get through this thing quick, And I've got two clients like that literally right now. One client couple, they've been married 5 years. One's unemployed, and one makes $80,000, and they live in a major city. You're like, do that math. Good luck. And they've already moved out. Like they're already living in separate spaces. You're like, first of all, I don't know how they're doing that, right? But besides the point, I'm like, you two are nice. I want to help you. So let's put something together. So that's always our philosophy. We want to work with nice people.
That's awesome. What a refreshing, I love to hear sliding scale, and you're here to really help people avoid, the cost of lawyers, and I think that's an amazing thing. So I think because interpersonal, we're always talking about it here. I'm very curious. Why do people get divorced from your vantage? What is the number one reason if you had to pick?
Oh man. In our world, number one reason is a lack of shared goals. So
Mm,
what do I mean by that? You get married and you think you're on the same page, right? You're all happy and everything's good, and you buy a house or you have your jobs, your careers. And then somewhere along the line, and this we see this a lot with people with kids, somebody is going to stay home. And so we say someone's working inside the home and someone's working outside the home. And there's a lack of recognition of how much hard work the person working inside the home is doing for zero paycheck, right?
mhm.
Nada. And and then the other person is building their career, doing their travel, going to their conferences, the happy hours, and then they become total strangers and neither of them understands the other. They don't have that, and they don't stay tethered to each other. They don't understand that the person with that 80-hour a week job traveling is also really burnt out and is exhausted and is doing their part for the family. So it's that lack of that recognition that they don't have that goal that says, look, we're going to stay married. We're going to power through this. We're going to do this for this period of time so we get to this place and then we can enjoy ourselves. They don't have those conversations. Now, that's the obvious one. But what I will tell you, and it's not to be salacious about it, but there are a surprising amount of people with substance abuse issues. And maybe it's not surprising, but there are a lot of our clients where you start as a numbers guy, right? You start like looking at the money and you start trying to track down the finances, and you start trying to figure out, like, not that it's your job to, but in your brain, you're just trying to go, what happened here? And
Mhm.
then you start to fill in those blanks by what people say or what they do, and that's really the heartbreaker. Those are the ones where you just heartbreaks because I don't have a substance abuse issue, and I'm not just saying, oh, just snap out of it. That's easy. What's wrong with you? You drink too much, right? It's a sickness for people, but it just hurts because it's not the relationship that broke down. It's this disease or this intruder, if you will, that came in and ruined it. And you're like, oh man, those are the ones that I was saying before, where you just go, man, if they could only just get themselves together, right? And
Right.
I have a great friend he is an alcoholic, right? You're never like I used to be, and he's recovered a few times, right? He's bottomed out a few times, and thankfully, thankfully he got pretty seriously injured last time. And so now that was his wake up call. But that's been good in a weird way. So
Right.
not that he had to go through that, but I wish sometimes people would have that, oh my God moment where they got the Jesus scared out of them. And then, that would help keep the marriage together. But a lot of them, I think, do go through that, unfortunately. And it's pretty sad.
Well, I personally don't. I'm off the sauce. So part of me wants to say it's music to my ears. Of course, it's not really music. It's we
Yeah.
live in an alcoholic society. Alcohol is completely
Yeah.
normal, but is it really normal? So in a way, I feel very validated by what you're saying. But it is sad because a divorce is typically a bad thing. So yeah, actually, I had a question about that. So I wrote here, I've never been married, but I try not to view breakups as a negative outcome. Instead, I
Yep.
see it maybe as fate. It's inevitable. It's something to walk away with lessons learned. So, do you think, maybe thinking about these cases that don't feel so tragic, do you think divorce has to be negative? That people might find themselves better off, that this was a good thing to happen?
Yeah, not at all. Absolutely. I'm not, as I say, I'm not pro divorce, I'm anti conflict. And when folks don't get along, and I say to myself, I don't know, you know, um, what your spiritual beliefs are, if you're a Buddhist and you think you get reincarnated, but I come from the Judeo Christian model where we have one go round. And if I have one go round, I want to make sure it's happy and fulfilling. And I'm doing the things I want to do with someone I want to do them with. And sometimes we outgrow people, especially if we got married younger. There's no shame in saying we've had a great run. We've raised some great kids. We've done some great things together. And now we're just moving into the next phase of our lives. Now, some folks can recognize that and say, okay, we've hit this point now, like empty nesters, right? They're off at college. Okay, we've been working to this day. Great. Now we decided we're going to travel. We're going to do this next thing. And that's awesome. They can stay connected and move forward. But again, talking about those shared goals, right? We didn't talk about that. We don't know where we are. We're roommates. We're perfect strangers. We get along well. There's no spark. There's no chemistry. There's no interest in really spending time with each other. And that's okay. And in those cases, that to me, especially when kids are involved, it models healthy behavior. Your parents, right? They're the litmus test for behavior. If you see them doing something, you're thinking to yourself, well, that must be okay if they scream and throw things, right? Because they
Yeah.
are my parents and that's healthy. Or if they're treating each other with respect, that's healthy. That's what I'm supposed to do. So by having these breakups, they can be healthy. They can be good, like they can be good role models for kids. This is how relationships end. And absolutely, I am 100% a firm believer that if you can keep your relationship together, great. If you're willing to put in the time, but if not, and things have just gotten off course and you're both at that point, 100% go your separate ways respectfully. Because if you don't do it at that time, that's when things go sideways. It's like that person who stays at the party too late and has that one more drink and gets in trouble and then gets in a fight for some reason at 3 in the morning. And you're like, why are you still in my house?
Get
So
out.
get out, right? Time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, right?
So another trope we see, on the subreddit, I don't know if you've ran into this one, break up with him. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of, men are bad culture. And I
Yeah.
obviously have done a lot of work on myself and I have a lot of internalized sexism, things like that I've had to work on. This podcast has a lot of women listeners. So keep that in mind. My
Hmm.
question is, how typical are you seeing a case where, it's this toxic man being left by a put together woman? Is that in the water?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a fun fact because in my world, nothing is fun. So I have to pretend. I laugh so I don't cry, Danny, is basically what it is. 70% of divorces are filed by women, 7-0. Yeah. So sister, moving on, right? And that's consistent across the years, across the time
Wow.
and space, right?
Wow.
So that tells you a lot. That tells you a lot that women have had it. And what's been interesting and what's refreshing. And so I'm going to give a little shout out. So I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. So I'm an only child. My dad left. He disappeared. Never saw or heard from him again after they got divorced when I was in high school. And so I am, of women, strong women, because my mom worked multiple jobs. My nana would cook. It's that whole thing, right? So that's my normal. Now, when you bring it back into our world, you do see a lot of that because there's a couple of, in my opinion, really, really positive things that are happening. Number one is that they're not fully there yet, but far more often today than, say, 50 years ago. They're entering the workforce, they're earning their earnings, they're able to live independently. And it's not like I need to get married, right?
Right.
I was joking, with you about Bridgerton. So we've been watching that show, and the whole premise of like these balls and like trying to get your daughter married off, it's like preposterous to me. Like, what is happening? But that was society, admittedly, hundreds of years ago, but not too far in the past, right? So now you've got women who are independent, educated, they're career oriented. They don't need the relationship. Of course, they want the relationship, right? They want to have a relationship, but they don't need it. And so they move on. And one thing that I see consistently over and over and over, and this is a real eye opener. So listeners really pay attention. The women who are career oriented are still doing all of the housework, of all the homemaking, as the kids would say, right? So not only does this woman have a high powered job working X amount of hours a week, but the husband is also still expecting her to pick the kids up from daycare, make dinner, clean the house, do the laundry. And so the division of labor is really fakaked. That's what we see in these situations where a wife is like, well, maybe if I was doing the job and you did all the laundry and cooked, okay, like we have a division of labor. I have a friend who that's the situation. He's self-employed, so he's around. He has flexible hours. His wife travels a lot. She works in a very high-powered job. They have a great relationship because he's like, sure, of course, you're working late. I'll take the kids to gymnastics or pick them up or do the homework or whatever. They're partners. That's what we're seeing a lot of. So we are seeing a lot more of this now where women are like, well, screw it, if I'm doing all the work anyway, and I'm bringing home the finances, I'm making the cashish here, then why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why am I stuck in this loop? And it's gotten over, I'd say the last 5 years has gotten much more prevalent, which is to me a positive thing because it indicates that women are starting to become more, advanced in their careers, more pursuing the education and the career paths that they deserve and should have. That we see that. And as a man, right, there's a part of you that looks at these guys and you're like, dude, really? Come on, get it together, man. Like I I'm not going to judge you, but help out, do something. Don't
Yeah.
be so helpless. So that's where you just want to shake somebody. Like,
Well, and do you
it's
think
a
it stems from their upbringing, right? Because like in my parents'
yeah,
households, they're very conventional. My dad is the breadwinner. My mom handles more of the household labor, things like that. So by
yeah,
default, we make fun of my dad now relentlessly because he doesn't know how a laundry machine works, which we think is
right, yeah,
hilarious. Um, and all he can cook is sandwiches, and we're like, that's actually not cooking, Dad. But
right, yeah,
you know, coming out of the box in college and in my early relationships, I had that kind of attitude of like, woman in the kitchen energy. Obviously, I've adapted now and
right,
I love cooking. I even like cleaning. I throw on a podcast and get it done. So what
yeah,
what is coming off these guys who are, they're kind of losing a great situation? Is it
right.
stubbornness? Is it the unwillingness to shift their dynamic that they're stuck in their childhood? Or what do you think?
I think it's an emasculation. That's the best way I could put
Mm,
it. And it's really there's a funny thing that happens. There's expectations that at least in my world that the men seem to have. The men in these situations will come in with some expectation of what their life should be like. They're the primary breadwinner. The wife should be perhaps home with the kids and things like that. Now you've got a woman who's earning more, or even in some cases, far more than the husband. And so they lose their identity. There's this lack of identity. They don't have the skills to work inside the home, but they also don't seem to have the skills to be the primary breadwinner. And therefore, they find themselves without a role. And it's that kind of Peter
yeesh.
Pan syndrome. Now, all of a sudden, I want to, become a I don't know, bongo player for a band, right? Or I want to live off the grid, right? We'll get guys who are like that. Well, I'm going to live out of my van. I'm like, maybe if I was 21, I'd want to do that, but not if I was 51 or 59 or, like it's just, that doesn't look comfortable, man. That's what I think is part of it. It's that expectations were not met. They just kind of, they kind of exhale and they just kind of give up. And then the wife is like, you're not even trying. And a lot of times these guys also, they will be either unemployed or underemployed. And
Yeah.
when you look at it, I can see why someone would say like, "Look, you've got skills. You could hustle a little more. You could at least get a job making blank using your degree." but instead you're choosing to work part-time, at the grocery store. Like you went to college and have a master's in, accounting, and you're a cashier. That doesn't, no disrespect to cashiers, but that doesn't really jive with what I was looking for when you and I got married 25 years ago. So that's what I see. I think it comes into this pattern of expectations were not met. There, some reason their career didn't go the way they wanted it to go. They blame the wife for her making more money. And then they got to just kind of pout and cross their arms and hold their breath and stomp. And like, dude, like if my wife made more money than me, fuck on, like that'd be great. Then together you're just, the house is making more money, right? Everybody's just
Right.
putting money into the joint checking account and let's build that sucker up. But instead they kind of take it as a personal front. That pattern I see quite a bit.
That's adding up. I mean, I was in a relationship like that, and I have to admit, it was a big ego hit. It really was. I mean, I was in my 20s or maybe late 20s, even. But,
Yep.
maybe I'm a bit of Peter Pan myself. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's like you just have to accept that this is, of course, a good thing. So, do you think that in these men's heads, it's sort of like, if I can't be the head of the household, I can't be the provider, which, in
Right.
their defense, is very much in the water. Every TV show, every movie you watch, I mean, you watch a movie from the 90s and it'll hit you over the head. It's like,
Yeah.
man make money, woman be hot. It's like crazy.
Right.
And do you think they're kind of stuck in that where like there's no road for me to be the provider and I'm not gonna be a Mr. Mom. And so they're
Right.
basically stuck. Is that the situation?
100%. And the weird thing is all the wife wants them to do is try.
Yeah.
And if you just tried, there's so many opportunities today. Technology has given us both a blessing and a curse. Whereas back in the day to start a business, man, my family has been entrepreneurial forever and they've owned restaurants. And to own a restaurant, man, in New York City or in Philadelphia, it's just, yeah, these are places where you're building buildings and staff and inventory. Nowadays, you could go online and sell stuff on eBay if you wanted and call
Yeah.
yourself an entrepreneur, right? You got a business. And a lot of the skills that these folks have could be transferable to an online environment, a consulting environment, a teaching environment. I would imagine if these spouses saw their, in this case, husbands taking one step towards some kind of either independence or initiative, that they would have never stepped foot in my office. They'd say, look, I get it. Especially as guys get older, right? You get into your 50s, you start getting laid off, and it's really hard to get that job. If your wife had said, look, I got a solid job. Why don't you take a year to figure out what it is you want to do? Open up that juice stand or whatever it is you always dreamed about doing, and I'll support you. And if they went and they did that, I think there'd be a lot different result in terms of the relationship than by them just sitting home and saying, well, yeah, I went online today and I looked for a job. Really? Well, that's what you've been doing for the last 47 days in a row. And when was the last time you brushed your teeth? Right? Like it's like,
Yeah.
so I got to move you forward. And it's hard because your heart breaks for those guys too. You're like, man, that sucks. I'm self-employed. So if I get fired, it's my own fault because it would be me who's firing myself. So these guys are in that place where they, like you said, they just kind of, I give up. It's too bad because they have a lot to offer.
It is too bad. I mean, that's a whole separate podcast we could do. I know it's a there's
Yeah.
some books out there about, the challenges for young men and things of that nature. Great discussion.
Hmm.
Okay, so I want to get a little bit into the money. I'm very curious about this. So, yeah, I mean, one thing that I found fascinating is, we're talking about saving people from the dreaded lawyers. Everyone complains how expensive lawyers are. Uh,
Yep.
so, that's and then we have this trope too of like, she took my house. Wah. So, but there is that other side, right? Where it's like you can have the
Yeah.
divorce go against you. You're talking about the judge who's having a bad day. He hasn't eaten
Right.
lunch. It's 11:30. He's starving.
Yep.
But I'm curious, yeah. What is a typical when we're talking about this typical client, which we're saying is maybe like a director level? So this is someone who's in the top 10%, someone who makes real money. What kind of
Yep.
savings is your business going to give them versus the legal route, generally speaking?
I'd say just to say to start 20 to 25,000, and that's if it goes well with lawyers. And if it goes not great, but not bad, saving them probably about 40 to 45,000. Then if
Wow.
shit goes sideways, you're looking at 100,
Woo!
200,000 in savings because it's just the math gets nuts. And as you know, every time you bring in a new expert or you have a deposition or you do some research, that's all billable time. And that's just that clock is ticking. And we, in our philosophy, is it's the whole teach a man to fish. We like to teach our clients how to do this because when they do it, doesn't cost them anything. When we do it, it's going to cost you money. And I say, look, by the way, I don't want to do all your discovery. Do you really think I want to rifle through your finances and your tax returns? And no, God, I want to go outside and walk my dog, right? Or whatever it is, or I want to help another client do a mediation. You can do this. Here's a list. Here's how you do all this stuff. Here's all the stuff I need from you. Go forth, go do that. Come on back when you got it. And that's where a lot of those savings come into play. That's one place, right? The other thing is there's one of me. I work for both of them, right? I work for both spouses. So you don't need two mediators. You just have one mediator.
One
So
guy.
immediately you're professional. Yeah, cut in half. And my job is not to prolong conflict. My job is to help you move forward. I get no satisfaction in helping you argue. That doesn't help you move forward. A lawyer, on the other hand, will, for every hour you spend and every hour you spend arguing, that's billable time. There is no real incentive when you think about it for a lawyer to help you resolve your divorce. And I'm not saying all lawyers are the same because I have some friends and some colleagues who are wonderful lawyers and who are settlement oriented. I've got a friend in Chicago and she sees a certain lawyer on the other side of the table. Like if I have someone that I refer and I go, look, these guys aren't mediation friendly, but I think they could, do it on the less, with lawyers, for example. She might not take the case knowing who the other attorney is because she's like, I don't want that headache. I want to help these people. I don't want that guy or that lady screaming at me. And she's like, I'm sorry, but I'm not the right fit. And that tells you when another lawyer doesn't want to work with a lawyer, man, you got some problems.
Wow. So another really fascinating case you told me about that was funny that I would never occur to me is that so sometimes someone will go to you and you're working it out. Things are going well. We've made
Sure.
progress and we've kind of achieved the goal here, which is to save a whole ton of money, not go to court. But then you told me this thing can happen where essentially the mediation is flipped on its head due to
Yep.
maybe at a third party, like their uncle will say something like, "Oh no, you could have got way more," something like that. So yeah,
Yep.
tell us about that.
Yeah, you get a lot of people who think they're smarter than you. And when I get into a session, obviously as a trained professional, and I was looking at the calendar and I looked back to when I actually went to some of these courses, and you're like, man, okay, so it's been probably 28 years since I've been doing this, and holy crap, I don't like to admit that, but okay. And you say to yourself, all right, well, I've got tons of experience. I've worked with clients worldwide. I've seen pretty much every single permutation I think I could have possibly seen. And you, whoever you is, comes in. And because you had coffee with your friend, that suddenly you're now the expert. And you come back in a session and you say, I was giving it some thought. Oh, crap. That's going to be a challenge. Or I was talking to someone, that's where you have a problem. And now my new favorite is, well, I went on Chat GPT and it
No.
told me, and I'm like, oh boy. And those are tough, man. And what's interesting, the folks who do that, they've got some kind of, I don't know if it's some sort of narcissism, some superiority complex. Because remember, 70% of women, right, file for divorce. In these situations, these are usually situations where the wife got the guy to agree to mediate. He was like not wanting the divorce. He just wanted things to be as is. But he would say, I'll go for the divorce if we mediate, thinking that in mediation, he's going to get one over on it, right? She doesn't have a lawyer to protect her. Little does he know, it's my job to make sure both sides are balanced. So I, in a way, am kind of leveling that playing field. So they come across with this sort of huffy puffy. And we've all got a friend like this, by the way. So think of the friend I'm talking about. Danny, you the same way, where they say things that are so outrageous that you as an intellectual or an intelligent or rational thinker go, well, I guess that must be true because it sounds smart, right? I go, okay, I'll believe them. And these folks will do that. They'll try to give you the bluster and the smokescreen. And I look at them like, yeah, that's not how this works. And they're usually not used to being called out because most people are like, oh, well, okay. Well, if you say that's how it goes, yeah, then I guess that's how it goes. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not how it works. Oh, yes. I read on Chat GPT. I say, well, I've been doing this a long time and I am professionally trained at Harvard and Northwestern and MIT. And, I could show you all my papers. But if you think Chat GPT knows better than me with my 30 years of experience, you just kind of sometimes you're not going to win that. And that's where in a mediation, sometimes they can flip. You turn to the other spouse and say, get yourself a good lawyer. I
Yeah.
have a list of folks that you can give a call to because we've officially gone off the rails. And I will tell you, the good news is in those cases, those people, if you call their bluff, not all the time, but they'll back down. They just need somebody to kind of step up a bit and say, "No, I don't think so." And that can sometimes bring us back on track, but not always, especially the pseudo intellectuals, those folks, they're the tough ones to work on. And there's one particular client that came to mind and they were a college professor. I'm
Oh
like, "Oh
boy.
boy. Like this is not debate class, man. This isn't. This isn't a research project. You're not writing a thesis. This is a divorce. This is how it works." No, this is not how it works. Oh, and it wasn't a law professor, by the way. If it was a law professor, I would have totally been on board. It was a theology professor. So I'm like,
Oh boy.
not sure what religion has to do with divorce here. Well, that's another pod, but it's just like that's where you get into these conversations. And those are the hard ones, the friends, and more often than not now today, the chat GPT.
It is scary to me, and I'm a big systemic guy, the systemic ills. I think ChatGPT presents with this authority. It seems so legitimate. The way it speaks to you, you go, "Oh
Right.
my God, well, this must know it's AI."
Right.
But it's obviously it's a bullshit machine. It doesn't cite its sources, doesn't understand what it's saying. It's
Hmm.
really scary to see how it's affecting people's mental health and relationships because they think they're talking to
Yeah.
someone like you.
Exactly. That's really hard. People don't understand that. Like you said, the words it uses really, wow, sound amazing. They're really well put together. So eloquent, must be right. At the end of the day, you need to have that reality check. And that's where humans are irreplaceable, in my opinion. They have that soft skill, they have that ability to look at somebody and get that sense of where they are emotionally and how they're feeling and what's going through their brain, right? From their body language or the sad, happy, that stuff. That's where we really struggle these days, where people are, and on top of that, they think everybody's an expert now, right? You can go and I could perform open heart surgery on you, Danny, because I read it on, Gemini, Google Gemini. It just said, first get a scalpel, lay Danny down. I know he doesn't drink, but get some ether and just knock him out, right? It's like, that's what it sounds like. Everything sounds so easy because it puts it in such, nice, neat ways. And then you get into the court system or you get into a real issue where people don't know how to resolve it. And now you've got real problems. And what's really difficult in my world is once trust is broken, you're screwed. That's the real problem. So when
Trust
people are
between
thinking of that
you and the parties or between each other? What do you mean?
between the parties, between the spouses, now all of a sudden somebody goes off and says something, and one spouse is looking at him like, well, Joe said that's not right. And they're trying to convince the other spouse it is and that Joe is wrong. And now they're like,
Mm,
wait a minute, Joe, why are we paying you? So they're mad at me. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, time out. I'm not gonna say ChatGPT is correct here. Then now they're like, the other person, well, why are you pushing this false theory then? And now we've got a big problem. Now everybody's mad. And then that's like, well, I don't know. I can't trust anything anybody's saying. I'm getting a lawyer. Well,
God.
that's a danger that you run into in these kinds of situations. And we see that especially even when people don't become our client. Like we have an initial meeting with me or something, and someone will say, oh, yeah, I was online. It's so easy. I'm like, okay, you own 3 rental properties, have a kid with autism, and your wife is at home, you have restricted stock units and all, and you're going to just use Chat GPT to figure all this out. I'm like, oh man, good luck. That poor kid. That's what I'm thinking. Tough
Bro's about
days.
Bro's about to get hosed in court and lose the Rivian?
It's right. And they don't think so. They're like, yeah, I'm
They
gonna,
know.
eh, eh,
The
what
addictive
if I know?
tech product told me more than the mediator can tell me. So
It did.
I know you and I align on something, which is we love a good quote. You've dropped some quotes here. So you told me one of your classics. I'm very fascinated with this. People are in violent agreement. What does that
Yes.
mean?
That's one of my favorites. I think I may have made that up. So if I did, I want to trademark that,
We give it
listeners.
to you.
Yeah, thank you. Violent agreement. To me, that's when two people are talking at each other, past each other, over each other, and they don't realize they're saying the exact same thing. They don't understand that you're in violent agreement. You just can't hear each other because you're screaming so damn loud. And
Mm,
when we try to get clients, couples have been doing that for a long time. And this goes to classic negotiation. That's what we call positional bargaining for the kids out there. If you're interested in this, positional bargaining is I want Chinese food. I want Thai food. I want Chinese food, right? Back and forth. The negotiator says, you're both hungry. Let's find some place to eat. They
mhm.
don't understand that it's not about the Thai or the Chinese or the pizza. It's about you guys don't realize it. You're in agreement. You're both starving. And the longer we argue about where we're going to eat, the more starving we're going to be. Let's get past that position and let's look at what your interest is. You're both saying the same thing. We see that in divorce all the time. Folks just can't communicate. And that goes back to a question, Danny, you asked before about breakups. And it is cliche, but true communication styles. It's really learning how to speak the other person's language and understand that just because I don't talk that way doesn't mean everybody talks the way I do. And so, as a listener, you've got to be able to speak all the languages and understand your partner, your spouse, your friend, your boyfriend, girlfriend. And then you put it through your filter. Then you say it how you're going to say it. You put it back out through their filter. It's a process. But yeah, violent agreement, 100%. You get more. And so much of that in divorce, it's just, I actually laugh at people and they kind of, when they're yelling, right? Sometimes it's hard to break up an argument when you're in the middle of it. And
Yeah.
so I'll just sit back and I'll smile. You guys are cracking me up. All of a sudden now their heads spin. What, you think this is funny? Where you no, it's like you guys are hilarious. You are just yelling at each other so loud and saying the exact same thing that neither of you can hear. You're saying the exact same thing. What do you want? I don't want to be homeless. What do you want? I don't want to pay too much in alimony. Okay, great. Let's figure out an amount of money that is okay to you and you're not homeless. Any questions? And more often than not, like really, we call it the zone of agreement. It's you find that 99.9% of the time in our world, 98% of the time, literally,
Wow.
statistically, 98% of the time, you can find that zone of agreement if you're willing to listen to it. But when you're in violent agreement and you're screaming and yelling at each other, yeah, nobody hears. So be in agreement, not violent agreement. We need more peace in this world. We need less violent agreement.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I loved on your website is you say, "I'm not a mental health professional," which I found very refreshing. As you know, we talked about, everyone today gets to be an authority and an expert with no
Yeah.
credentials and no basis. That said, in a sense, and I'm curious, how much does basically cooling people the heck off play
Mhm.
into effectively doing this? Because the way you're describing it, sounds like the zone of agreement, it's not that hard to reach.
Right, 100%, and all the time. You're trying to get people to understand, and again, this goes down to negotiation strategy. If you're trying to get somebody who's got a bank filled with hostages to let them go, you're not gonna scream at them. That's gonna agitate them, you know? It's like, this is like, forget what you see in the movies. You don't get the bullhorn and try to come in. You just
Yeah.
don't. Right? You say, well, gee, man, what's going on for you? Because this person probably didn't have someone who would listen to them and take them seriously and care about what they felt like. So you are doing what we call acknowledge and validate. You're saying, man, that sucks. If I were you, I would feel the same exact way. Notice I'm not agreeing with you. I'm simply saying, yeah, I could see how that would be really frustrating that you never went to your families on Thanksgiving. Because, yeah, quite frankly, I could see that. Now, maybe
Mm.
your family is filled with psycho people and, your soon to be ex doesn't want to go to the nut house with the folks there. But, it's just, I could see how you would feel that way. And like, thank you. Thank you for saying that. So, what I've done in that case is I've got them to think I'm on their side, even though I'm still neutral. They feel heard, they feel like somebody understands me. Okay, I am willing to talk. And I do the same for the other side as well until we finally get everybody to go, this guy gets us. We can have a conversation. Or, like you said, it's like when you're talking about things when people get amped and they're up and angry, that's the diffusion technique. That's where you're trying to get them to calm down. Like with a little kid, if they're throwing a freaking tantrum, you're not going to scream back at them. Maybe you're not going to I'm not a big fan of like maybe coddling a kid, like giving them everything they want because that's a hostage situation. But it's like, okay, you know what? And we do this in mediation as well. Hey guys, you know what? It doesn't seem like we're making any progress here. I'm a little disappointed because I thought we would have gotten farther. That's a technique, disappointment. Now, people are in this situation thinking, well, the mediator, he's kind of parental. And we've got that friend too, right? Where that friend is coming at us and doing all that stuff. And, and you just say, like, I'm not mad at you. I'm disappointed. I really thought we were better friends. I really thought you would have shown up for me, or I really thought you could have picked me up from the airport for all the times I drove out to LAX and picked your sorry ass up at, whatever time. And that's where you're not arguing and you're not telling them to kiss off. You're just sort of expressing how you're feeling. And you use a lot of those different techniques to cool the heads. And when someone's like yelling at someone and in a session, it's like, wow, geez, when we first met initially, I really thought that you had more respect for your soon to be ex, but guess I was
Mm,
wrong about you. Like I'm a little disappointed because I really thought this mediation would have worked, but if this is how it's going to be, I guess we're not going to be able to have this conversation. So would you like me to refer you to some attorneys? And people kind of they you've got their attention now because you're using it's not passive aggressive, it's just passive. Right? It's just kind of
yeah,
you're taking the air out. And the way I describe it, and this is the best way to remember it is fire needs oxygen to burn. Take the oxygen away. Stay
yeah.
quiet. When you stare at people, they get so uncomfortable. So you just look at them and they're going and they're going and you're going and you're just like, they're like, well, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you saying anything? No, I'm listening to you. I want to make sure I understand everything you're saying. So if I understand you correctly, your soon to be ex never cooked in 27 years, never once. Okay, I understand that. Is a terrible
Mm,
parent. I'm guessing when we hang up, I should probably call child services. So I took a note of that. And they're looking at you like, who's this freaking guy? And it's like, you're not trying to be smarmy or smart alecky about it, but you're kind of taking the oxygen out by being quiet and then reflecting back what it is they're saying.
wow.
And right? And when you do that, people like we started off with this, when you're being an ass, right? You just know it. Come on. And if you don't, there's something not right upstairs.
Yeah.
And that's part of the technique is to just when people hear it and they hear the absurdity of what they're saying, those you never do or we never went black. It's ever really never. That's how you get these conversations to cool. So there's a lot to unpack there, but these are things you can use, listeners can use with their friends, with their family, with their coworkers. This is all of what I'm doing in the background. This is all what I'm trained. It's really fascinating stuff. Not that I would hoist any learning upon your audience and force them to read textbooks, but there are really good books out there on this stuff, and they're just fascinating. So when you read it, and you learn about it, and you understand all the games that are going.
Well,
So
it's interesting. I'm going off our interview script here, but you're an insightful guy, so I want to throw this at you. It actually very much lines up with something you said. I've been thinking a lot about it. It's this paradigm. It's an older book. I think it was written in the 70s. It's called Nonviolent Communication. And
yes,
you know it. Yeah.
I
And
do.
yeah, I'll
Absolutely.
tell you this, that one of the things I learned from it that really shook me and it's really affected how I think a lot is, my friend put up this event and he didn't invite me, and the way I thought of it as I thought, he left me out. I feel left out.
Right.
And we've been squabbling over this because some people are like, no, that is a feeling. But this book is very specific. It says, no, left out is not a feeling. Left out is characterizing the other person's behavior. And so I
Yep.
had this thought, and I'm getting upset. I'm getting upset and I'm going, "Oh, this is crazy and how could somebody do this?" And then I go, I'm not feeling left out because it's not a feeling. I use that word. I said I'm
Right.
disappointed. And once I
Right.
had that thought, Joe, I really was like, disappointed in what? I haven't spoken to this person. There's really no good reason they would include me. I wouldn't expect them to invite me. And I
Right.
actually was very alleviated once I realized that I didn't really have a good reason to be disappointed and that this was very much an
Exactly.
ego response, right? Uh,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
Good on you. Yeah, absolutely. You went through the process. You processed the emotion properly and went through the peaks and valleys, and you came out the other side and said, okay, moving on, right? And absolutely, Danny, that's a key thing that so many people take a personal affront to it. And the best example I think about, I happen to be a texter. So that's my
Mm.
like primary means of communication. And if I text somebody and they don't text me right back, I'm like, what are they doing? Why aren't they sitting there with their phone, waiting to text me back? I showed them a funny joke and they should have sent me an emoji. Damn them. Right. But you're like, well, maybe they're in the bathroom or maybe they're
Right.
cooking dinner, or like they're asleep, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I was
that's part
recording
of
the
it.
podcast, Joe. Relax.
I swear, Joe, come on. But you're not invited to my party, Joe. So I'm very disappointed in you, Danny. So that's it, right? You have to talk yourself through the whole cycle. It's like, okay, it's not them, it's not me, it's nothing. This is this just is stoicism at its finest. It's just let it go, man. And then if there's what you do though, you do stuff like that, and good for you to do that, then you will really know when there's something serious to be upset about. There is when someone does something intentional, that's where I think you cross a line. And we as humans, we like to think ourselves as so intelligent and enlightened. And man, we do a lot of crazy crap without even realizing it. And we say a lot of hurtful things. And there are not a lot of emotionally intelligent people out there who understand that. And it's funny. I'll give you a great example and true story. Literally happened last week. So my wife, she's awesome in the sense that she's not a like big fancy gift girl. You don't have to buy her jewelry. She doesn't want flowers on Valentine's Day because she thinks it's a scam. I'm like, this is amazing, right? This is awesome. So I was like, I was feeling bad. I was like, boy, she didn't ask for anything for Christmas or Hanukkah. I'm like, come on, like, what are you doing? I have a friend who's a jeweler, and there was this like custom piece that my wife had wanted, and that's why I went and I snuck out and I bought it. I just gave it to her randomly, like literally a week ago for just like for no other reason. And she was having a day and a half, actually. So I put it on her and she's like, oh, wow. Oh, you didn't buy me. Oh, no, you didn't buy me this, did you? And then she's looking in the mirror and she's, doing the thing, like looking down. She's like, oh, and she's like, this chain's a little short. Like it's like it's choking me a bit. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, okay. I went, I snuck around to get to the jewelers and hid it in the sock drawer and did all those things. Right. And so I walked away and I was like a little mad and I was a little disappointed. I went downstairs and I said, well, okay. Now, like you in your example, I could have stewed on it, but she came down about a half hour later and she goes, I am so sorry. I love it. And threw her arms around me, gives me a big hug, big kiss. She
Aw.
goes, it's amazing. It's amazing. I didn't want to spend the money on it. You're such a good husband. Like, did all the accolades. She's like, I'm so sorry. I was having a day. And I said to her, I was like, Cheryl's my wife. I was like, hon, I was like, thank you so much for saying that. That meant the world to me because I was like, I didn't think you liked it. I was like, I thought it made mad. And she's like, no, I love it. I love it. And then we were able to have a really nice night. We sat down, we had some dinner, we watched some TV, right? But it took two emotionally intelligent people to do that. And very rare is it to find two of those people in the same space. There's usually one, but very rarely two. So as the one, you need to be the one who, as we'll get to in these scenarios in a bit, you need to be the one who rises above and who elevates and who says, okay, just because everybody else is behaving a certain way, I'm not going to behave that way, or I'm not going to take it personally. And it's really hard. But if you can master that, like you shared in your example, which was brilliant, then you will be far better off and far less stressed and far less worried. And your life will be immeasurably more pleasant. I can promise you that. That is absolutely A plus and good on you for reading that book and going through that process that you did.
Your story made me well up a bit. I feel like it's so small, but it I guess what's beautiful to me about it is very counterintuitive in a way, right? Because it's like you went out of your way and it was this wonderful gift, something that she
Right.
wanted. It was custom, good Lord. And she did want it. She did
Right.
want it, you know?
Right.
And then yeah, I mean it's a beautiful story. So I'm so happy we got that because I don't know. I think one of the now I'm going on a tangent, but whatever. That,
All good.
the short form video, right? We live in a very short form era. It's like instant pleasure, right? We see it in so many
Yeah.
ways. It's DoorDash, it's Amazon, everything now. What I want
Right.
now.
Right,
And
right.
you did everything right, and the outcome that you wanted wasn't immediately there, but it was there. It was just late, and you had to be patient and have the emotional maturity for it. So God, I love that story.
Yeah, thanks. And that's it. And that's a great point. We're all expecting the likes, the comments, the quick reaction. Sometimes it takes people to circle around a bit. And if given enough space and time, you'd be surprised. People will eventually usually figure it out, your friends, your family. And if you have some space and you give some thought like you did and like in the story I did, then it does avoid that argument. It does avoid people blowing up on each other because now you put yourself in all kinds of other perspectives of the other person. Like, why did that person cut me off in traffic? Did they do it on purpose? No, maybe they're late to work.
No.
Maybe their kid threw up on them and they had to go run back home and change their clothes. Like, you just got to let it go. I mean, there's so many things that people take so personally and this is a family show, so we'll stay away from politics, but to me that's the whole problem we've got is that everybody has got this manufactured outrage when I got news for you. There's really not a lot that impacts your day to day other than the person you're living with, the friends you have, job you have, the house you have, right? Your immediate circumstances. Focus on that. You're 95% of the way there, right? There doesn't you have to worry about all that other crap.
Yeah, I think the other thing well, I have 2 things. Let's go back. Let's stay here for a second because you're a bit wiser than me, got maybe a few years on me. We don't need to go into how many. And
You
I think maybe it's a young man's fantasy, where I think, God, like this text thing, right? And I'm so happy you
Yeah,
said it because I'm like, I'm the same way. I send a text to someone and I do have like a little flash of like, what are they even doing? It's
right.
it's crazy.
Duh.
But you have the same thing, and it's like, that's just human nature. Like that doesn't go
Yeah,
away. That flash is still there.
yeah. Nobody wants to be rejected, and that's what it feels
Mm.
like. It's digital rejection. All of a sudden, you're like, "Well, why am I not good enough to reply?" "Why did you swipe left or right?" It's like, "What are you doing? Right? What's the problem here? Why am I not good enough?" And that is the culture we live in, and we see it, of course. And I'm going to say this again, having been raised by females and married to a very strong female, but society has really put the screws down on women over the years. And the self esteem issues that crop up are just maddening to me, right? As
Mm.
somebody who's raised by women, loves my wife, you're just like, and my wife, who's a very strong woman, struggles with self-esteem issues based on everything that society has told her. Now men are starting to be impacted by that as well through these, whether it's dating apps or it's the messages that have been out there. And it's like all I say to myself is, why do we have to put somebody else down to make ourselves feel better? If we all lifted each other up and we all had some good self-esteem, that when I sent Danny that text and he got back to me 2 days later, my first instinct wouldn't have been, dude, what the hell? It'd have been like, hey man, were you doing something fun for the last 2 days? What's going on? Right? I wouldn't have even asked why you didn't reply because you'd be like, yeah, Joe, actually, I got, this free trip to Cancun for the weekend. And I just flew out on Friday and I came home on Monday. And you'd be like, dude, awesome. Right. We just are all so hyper escalated, looking for conflict, looking for reasons. And, whether it's politics or media or the pace of life that's done that, that's really become hard. And that translates into also my practice is that we've seen more and more conflict now. It just shows up in our office. Before, when we first started practicing 20 years ago, people would like go out to dinner after they walked out. They'd be like, "Oh, you want to go get a burger? Sure, let's go." Now people are like, "I will cut you." It has changed. The
Wow.
temperature of negotiations have changed, and it's a lot of it is financial pressure as well as what we've kind of seen societally, and it's not moving in a great direction. So having the opportunity to share these kinds of things with however many people are listening, I think it's important is that you got to handle your own shit. You got to keep your communication in check and you got to learn how to non-violently communicate because there's enough violent communication going on out there,
Yeah. So I want to go back to this other thing you said because this is something I hope I can execute on. So I want to see if I got a handle on it. This reflecting back thing. Now I will
Yeah,
admit I struggle, and you made this distinction. You said, "Look, it's not snarky. It's not condescending the way you're saying it back to them. It's very
right.
sincere." So I just wanted to get a handle around that. So if someone is kind of always endeavoring you, Danny, you always think you're so smart because you have your podcast. You think you know how people work. You never
Right.
actually listen. So,
Yep.
how would you kind of respond to something like that?
Oh, this is great. This is my favorite things. There are two magic words in in that kind of a conversation, and they are so simple. It is the word how and it is the word what. Let's play this out.
Okay.
Somebody comes at you, comes in hot, whatever they're saying. Instead of getting defensive, you simply ask a question back. So, Danny, Danny, you know everybody. What gives you that impression?
Mm.
So I'm not defensive. I'm genuinely asking you what makes you say that. What makes you say that? Well, you know, huh? How do I come across like that? Can you give me an example? Again, right? And what you're doing, what the other person doesn't realize you're doing is you're taking the temperature down on the conversation. You're removing some of the oxygen by asking the questions because now you're getting them to talk again. You're not going back at them. You're not escalating.
Mm.
You're de-escalating. So how and wow, I never realized I did that. Okay, how could I do better? If you were me, what would you change? You hear the words
Ooh, I
how, what,
love
right?
that. If you were me, what would you
Right.
change? That's so like it's almost a mind fuck.
Right, exactly. It is because it's when you are in a position like you are, like I am, where we're fortunate in that people listen to us for some God only knows reason. You just say, well, look, I care, and I do care. I care about everybody's opinion, not to the point that I'm going to lose sleep and go, "Oh my God, I don't like me." But it's like, you know what? As a professional who is dealing with people in conflict and in really sensitive situations, I do really care. Sometimes I care a bit much, and I do want to know if there's something I could do better. And sometimes the so high place you need, ultimately, when you've got this right is when, and I've done this in some mediations as well. At the end of the mediation, I'll apologize to the clients. And I'll say, you know what, you guys, reflecting on this in our third session, I don't feel like I gave you guys enough airtime to talk about alimony. If you'd like some extra time, let's take it now. Like, for example, because you're also checking your own communication right now. That's Jedi Master. That's like, that's just, you're building your own Death Star at that point. So, but it's just, you've got to really, those how and why questions are really powerful. They slow the conversation down. They elicit information. Then once you go back on those a few times, 2, 3 times, now the person's calm based on what they've said. You, as the listener, as Danny, could say, geez, based on what they said, boy, wow, I never realized I did that. Thanks for pointing that out. If you feel it to be true. And you could say, well, I'm not sure how you see it that way. From my perspective, what I think, right? And again, right? What I think, not what you think, you're a
Mhm.
jerk, right? What I think is this. And then does that make sense? And you see, so that's what you're doing. And you're getting people to give you information because you genuinely want it, right? It's not like you're trying to be a jerk about it. And then you can filter and see if they're in your world, their opinions have any merit. So how and what, those are the two simple one word questions, but lead everything you're going to say with a how or what the best you can. And that will get you the information you need and to extend that conversation.
Weapons
There
of
you go.
curiosity.
Absolutely.
I
Man,
love
that's
it.
perfect. Okay, I'm stealing that. Sorry. You can have violent
There we
agreement, but I'm
go.
stealing that. Yeah, trade.
That's the dream. Get in the Joe Dillon quote book, baby. All right, so
That's it.
let's wrap up the interview section. I'm having a blast, but I wanted to end on some of this the ridiculous cases, the outliers, not the
Yeah,
typical, not the meat and
right.
potatoes. You know, you mentioned rich people coming in with a certain energy. And
Yeah.
look, a lot of us, it's a tough time. It's a tough time for a lot of people out there. So we want to hear about these rich people getting eaten alive. We want to hear about you checking them. Tell us a story.
Sure. So we've had the good fortune of working with some folks that you would see on television or you would see as athletes and things like that. And some of these folks are really nice, like really
Mm.
down to earth. And you're just like, yeah. But for the most part, like we said, we treat everybody the same because they've got problems just like we do. They're getting into the same exact arguments you and I are doing, just with the many more zeros after their end, which is, on their checkbooks. And one of my favorite stories is we got a phone call from someone. This person was the CEO of a company, and it's a company everyone knows because their name is like on the baseball stadiums and football stadiums. It's like they are the CEO of this massive corporation. And this person calls and is demanding to speak to someone. And we're saying, my wife gets a call and she transfers me is like, you know, talking, I need answers. And it's like, well, certainly we can make an appointment. And the person utters the phrase, "Don't you know who I am?"
Oh,
That's
God.
awesome. And I'm like, yes, sir, I actually do. I don't know you personally, right? But, here comes the snark, right? But yes, I am a fan of XYZ team, and I do understand that your company is the thing, and I know who you are, and I can see the caller ID. I said, but sir, we treat all our clients with the same, care and respect, and we really just don't, we don't provide favoritism. We don't play favorites, right? If you want our services, here's the process. I'm really not sure what to tell you. And they hung up. So that was one where we didn't get. And then another client, which we did, was a TV personality. And I can tell you something as a quick aside that when you've helped someone divorce and then, you're just hanging on a Sunday with your beer and your nachos and you flip on the TV and the game and you see this person on your screen and it scares the bejesus out of you. Like, why are you in my living room on a Sunday? I know you. But in those cases, what was so funny is that our entire business hinges on confidentiality, right? 100%. You have to feel comfortable that you can say things to us, that you're going to disclose financial information. I mean, hell, we've got your social security numbers. We've got your kids' birth certificates. Like, we've got it all. We could build a whole new family if we wanted to, right? But you got to trust us. And it was a constant stream of, well, people know who I am. They can't know about this. It can't be this. Da, da, da. Like, you can't say anything about it. Can't do this. Can't do that. And after a while, I was just like, listen, I understand, right? You're just trying to be nice, but you say, listen, I understand you're making it impossible for me to do. And
Mhm.
I have some news for you, but if you don't work through the confidential process of mediation, there's a reason they call it open court because it's open to everybody. I don't think people realize this, but Danny, if you and we were bored one day and we wanted to meet up somewhere in Southern California, and we said, let's go sit in the back of a courtroom and see what's going on. We are absolutely, as citizens of this country, entitled to do that. And trust me, I had a neighbor growing up who sat in the back of the courtroom and she was the gossip of the neighborhood. And she'd come in and go, oh, you're not going to believe who's getting a divorce. And, like all the ladies on the block, real. Right. And I'm
I
like,
love
well,
her.
so right, yeah. So we've got a choice, sir. You can either help me help you and keep this confidential, and then you can go back to doing your thing on TV, or you can go out into open court and knock yourself out. What would you prefer? I'm okay either way. And that's when you take that out, when you don't have that horse in the race and you're like, listen, I work for you. I'm okay either way. If you don't think this is working out, just remember this. You paid our fees. They're non-refundable. I'd like to give you the service that we're here to give you. But if you don't want that and you want to take your chances in front of the judge and the jury and whoever, I guess, and that's that kind of devil don't care sort of. And give you
Mhm.
another quote book. I call it detached engagement. That's exactly what it is. It's, I'm engaged with you. I care about you. I want to help you, but I'm not in the box with you.
Mhm.
I'm out. I'm outside. I'm trying to help. So, and that, thankfully, that individual did pursue through to the very end and continued to haunt my dreams for a few months after. So, yeah, on television.
That's very funny. Yeah, let's wrap up on let's call that the final question there because I was thinking about that earlier. But this is good to know. So another benefit of mediation is that it's confidential. You're not going to get your dirty laundry aired. I know some of the
Yeah.
listeners here are, got skeletons in the closet. So call Joe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was wondering about that. Me and my family, we watch this show called The Practice. We love it. It's a legal drama. You've got
Hmm.
lawyers, protecting murderers. That's their job. They're
Yeah.
officers of the court. And they've also got prosecutors, which can be a political job. And sometimes you got to prosecute someone who, maybe you're not 100% sure is guilty or whatever it may be. You get
Yeah.
into tough binds, and that scares me. I'm a very guilty, ruminating kind of guy. So that's what I was curious about, Joe. Do you carry this with you? You mentioned this briefly, you wanted to watch your baseball game, but does it weigh on you ever?
Yeah, all the time. And when we get clients who don't want to do what we ask them to do, or who aren't engaged in the process, I kind of get mad because I'm like, I'm more invested in this than you are. That's not right.
Mm.
I shouldn't be caring more. And that's the decision I had to make as I continued to practice. I say, I can't care more than the clients do. And there are ones that where you just have to sometimes you just shake your head. People are big boys and big girls, and they're going to make their own decisions and they're going to do what they think is best. And no matter what you tell them or try to share with them or convince them of, they're going to do their own thing, and that's fine. But there are certainly cases that slip away where you're like, boy, that stinks. They should have mediated, or I wish they had done X, Y, or Z. There are folks where you just sometimes, especially as someone who, right, I shared with you that grew up in a single parent household and my mom worked, multiple jobs. And boy, oh boy, the work that she did to do that was just amazing. So never did I realize that how precariously perched we were of losing the house or the electricity getting shut off or whatever it was. And I think about client couples and they're in that situation and I watch them and I look at their finances and it really breaks my heart, especially good hardworking people who have worked their entire career in service industries or in what we in the world might call blue collar professions, which my dad was a bricklayer and a contract guy, so it's like I come from that family, and they've got like next to nothing in retirement. They're like 60 years old, 65 years old. You're thinking, this person is never going to retire. What's Social Security going to be at? $1,400 a month? Like, this person can't live. And those are the ones where you lose the economic partnership of the marriage because obviously two households are more expensive to run than one. And those are the ones that keep me up at night where you go, they've got all this debt, they've got no savings, a lot of times we see a lot of the debt can sometimes be accumulated by special needs children because of our healthcare system, right? Is just that's yet another podcast we'll be on. Is that, it's like,
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
are you bankrupt because you love your child?
Oh,
Like,
God.
this is just my rage, It's like, so, and you see it. It's like, well, they need specialized therapy, the inhaler, the this, the that. And it's like, none of that's covered. It's like, so that's where I have to kind of take a deep breath and, just try to be positive. But yeah, those are the kind of common situations that really keep me up at night. So sadly.
Wow. Well, I can't thank you enough. What an incredible I'm like, I've never been more excited to edit an episode just so I can re-listen to this and write a new list of questions for you, so awesome. So much like relevant experience to this podcast. So, with that being said, I'm absolutely thrilled. I tried to pick some good situations here. For second story, we got AITA for not backing up my husband when he ordered our
Yep.
adult daughter to go to her room. But first, and these are roads we've been down before, so I'm really excited to see how you take this one apart, Joe. So here we go. AITA for asking my husband if he is a sexist. I'm a 24. My husband is 31M. We both make pretty good money, but he always makes more because he's 10 years out of college. I'm only 3 years out. For the first time this past year, I actually brought in more income than him. When I got my W 2 in the mail early this year, his had already come, so I knew what he earned. I looked at my earnings and was shocked. I guess it was because of all the overtime I'd done in 2020, but I was proud of myself. When I showed him, he was speechless, but it didn't seem like it was in a happy way. He calmly said, "That's awesome, babe." In the moment, a little voice in my head was telling me he felt a pang of jealousy or competitiveness, but he didn't seem like he wanted to keep talking about that subject, so I dropped it. Just recently, we're now in June, we were talking about our marriage and money. He actually brought up that it initially upset him that I made more than him last year. He didn't really explain himself, just said that it didn't sit right with him, but that after further reflection, he, quote, realizes it's not a competition. I'm over here scratching my head thinking, but why was that a problem for you in the first place? I would be thrilled if my wife brought in good money, especially 3 years out of school. It actually really upset me that he would have ever initially viewed it as a competition. I asked, why would that upset you? Do you not think women should make more than their husbands? He replied with, don't try to make me out to be a sexist. And without batting an eye, I responded with, well, are you? He flipped out and started saying he couldn't believe I was accusing him of being a sexist when I know him. I wasn't trying to say he was sexist. I was just trying to get him to see how bad this looked. Instead, he got defensive and has been very cold to me since. I guess I could see why he's offended because no one wants to be accused of such a horrible thing by their spouse, but I feel I have a right to ask that question considering what happened. So, A,
Oh boy, that's a tough one, right? I think when you think about it, we've been talking about it, how we're in this weird place right now in society where expectations and definitions of gender roles are shifting. And I don't think they've really kind of coalesced around something. They haven't solidified. We're all trying to figure it out ourselves. Like, right, we're kind of in the dark. I think the standard definitions that, is we had, or even just heck, 10 years ago, things have shifted. I don't know. I mean, that to me, I think is kind of part of this challenge. What do you think, Danny?
yeah, well, I actually thought of something that you mentioned about your wife earlier, which I think is true for
Yeah.
many, if not all women. Certainly, women, I feel confident saying in our society, we can call it big pretty. There's this complex,
Yeah.
these issues
Yeah.
women have. It includes weight, it includes attractiveness. Now, you and I, Joe, we are obviously extremely good looking men,
Devastatingly handsome. Yes, exactly.
but
I'm
I'm
going
never
blind looking at you. I mean, I might have to close an eye. I'm sorry.
I turned off my camera for you for a little bit. I didn't wanna hurt you. But, I've come to realize, I'm never going to understand what that's like for a woman, and I could say the same about Black people, about minorities in this country.
Right.
I just won't get it, baby. I will never have that firsthand experience. And I
Right.
absolutely will sit here and say, I think it is more difficult to be a woman, especially now with these evolving standards. You're up against a lot. And I think in this situation, I do feel that she is being a little hard on him because I think that his reaction, while it's not necessarily okay, it might not be exactly something that we're free to just adjust. I mean, you and I were just talking about this, right? We talked about
Yeah.
we have this impulse, this absolute toddler impulse when sending a text message. How dare they not respond? And
Right.
so what happens, right? She tells him, she essentially breaks the news like, "Look, I'm showing you, babe, I made more money than you." And he says flatly, "That's awesome, babe." And for me, I see this is a man he knows the right thing to say, and he said the appropriate thing. His emotions don't align with that. But
Hmm.
I'm not mad at him, or I don't think it makes him a bad person that he does have this ego hit. I think this is a formative thing, and I'm big on formative,
Yep.
where like, yeah, and I gotta be honest with you. I think it is a process for a man to adjust to this situation. Now, it has to be something you're conscious of and aware of, something you need to work through and be comfortable with in the end. But
Yep.
the impulse, like, yeah, my chick is making more money than me. She's the provider. I don't necessarily think that I'm gonna be able to jump out of my chair with joy and be able to celebrate that on impulse every single time.
Right. Yeah. And I'm firmly in your camp. We all get messages. And when you think about messages, to just even go a little adjacent, where, oh, well, you're a guy, you should be good at sports. Why? Right?
Yes.
So some guys just aren't good at sports. There's some women who can throw a baseball further than a guy, right? This is just like, well, oh, you should be. You're a man. It's like, well, no, that's not the definition of manlyhood that I'm, putting myself under. And as these sands shift, and exactly, I agree with what you said. It's like he's he's evolving. So I'd say good for him that he had muted enthusiasm, right? And that's one of those situations where sometimes you have to look at somebody and recognize that's the best I can get from them where they are, meet them where they are,
Right.
so to speak. And that's an opportunity for conversation in the future to talk about what is it you're feeling like? How are you feeling about this? What could I have said differently? And that's a good moment of dialogue where, especially for a couple, because in my world, money is such a hand grenade in divorces. Money styles are hugely different, and income. And we've talked about this. We've had client after client where the female is the primary breadwinner and the male is you know, not even the working inside the home, is just kind of floating aimlessly. And that can fester and really cause problems down the road. So I'm happy to hear that, you know, the woman in this case is thinking about this, because this is a conversation you should have sooner rather than later. Unpack this and really understand what's going on back there. And perhaps it might be a bit of soothing the fragile ego of this guy, and for the guy to do a little personal growth. So that's kind of
Now
there as I'm floating.
you're following me, right? Because so what she does, right? She says, "But he didn't seem like he wanted to keep talking, so I dropped it."
Right?
And I thought that was very
Yep.
reasonable of her. She's like, "Okay, it's touchy, I understand." So
Yep.
now we cut to June. I'm not really sure how long this time gap here is. Maybe, W2 mail early this year. So yeah, it sounds like it's been a couple months. We
Yeah.
talk about the marriage money. She brings up he actually brought up that it initially upset him that I made more than him last year. He didn't really explain himself, just said that it didn't sit right with him, but that after further reflection, he, quote, realizes it's not a competition.
Okay.
So that seems pretty reasonable to me. It's like he's like, yes, I essentially had an impulse, but that's not what it actually is. She writes, I'm over here scratching my head thinking, but why was that a problem for you in the first place? I would be
Hmm.
thrilled if my wife brought in good money, especially 3 years out of school. Now, to me, this feels a little bit like a man at this point, like a man telling a woman, like, babe, why are you feeling insecure? You're freaking hot. If I was as hot
Hmm.
as you, I wouldn't feel insecure because I would know I'm hot. And it's like, well, you just don't know the first thing about being a woman.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And he's developing. He's in that age, right, where it's and it's starting to grow my career. I'm trying to be the provider. I'm trying to whether we all realize it or not, men and women, there are those invisible stereotypes, those expectations that society has placed on us no matter what you do. And you can even look in, like, even for guys, as the evolution has gone, right? We start looking at the cartoons, and the Disney and the princes are all very handsome and ripped abs and all. And you're thinking, well,
Right,
I guess
right.
that's even I have to look like the cartoon, right? I'm more of a Homer Simpson guy, and that's this guy is more some prince and some Disney whatever. And it's like, so he's kind of evolving, and again, that conversation, that opportunity for conversation, there's where that's also a good opportunity for the wife in this situation to sort of use one of my favorite questions that I didn't tell you before. I was holding out on you,
Ooh,
but it's a gem. Get ready. Here comes the knowledge bomb. It's help me understand. That is a great way to
I
ask
love that.
someone, right? Help me understand. Why do you feel like that? What could have I said different? How can we move past this? There's those words again, right? Help me understand, because it's not saying you did this, you're a jerk, you're wrong. Help me understand why you reacted that way. I really would like to know.
And to be fair to her, and we're going to talk about real mechanics here of language and being asking a question versus really asking, right? Because she actually
Yeah.
starts off asking. She says,
Yeah.
why would that upset you? And that to
Right.
me is great because we can more or less achieve what you're saying. But instead, she fills in the blank and she says, do you not think women should make more than their husbands?
Yeah.
And wouldn't you say we're talking a lot about these weapons of curiosity, trying to take the oxygen
Hmm.
out of the fire. When you ask this question this way, you actually are probably not removing oxygen, but rather adding it because you're saying, I know what you think. I isn't it? Isn't that right?
Yeah. And listen to the question she asked. Now, on the surface, somebody who heard that says, yeah, she asked a question. As a professional negotiator, no, she didn't. She told him how
Ooh,
he feels. She
ooh.
didn't ask him a question because the word you was in there. And read it again. So let's say it out loud for the listeners. Read it because I don't have it right in front of me.
Why would that upset you? Do you not
Why
think
would that upset you? What's the implication? You are upset. You did something bad, wrong. You're upset. Why are you upset?
do you
Okay.
not think women should make more than their husbands?
Right. You got to stay quiet. Whenever asking a question, you got to wait for the response. But the question she should have asked in this situation, instead of why, you were upset, how does that make you feel? How? There's the word.
How?
How does that make you feel? I feel like then you're going to get information, right? I feel like I should be the provider. What makes you say that? Right. So there's those words again, right? It's like you're trying to elicit information. What she did by asking the question, she put him on the defense. She said, you immediately, like, you, you're telling me something. And then she answered it. And then that pushed him over. Instead, ask the question, wait for the answer. Help me understand why you feel that way, or how come you feel that way, or what is it that makes you think that? All those right?
Right.
You're hearing the difference, right? We're getting that information. And then again, like we've been talking about sometimes, and it sounds like in this case, the wife is a bit more emotionally intelligent in this example. So therefore, as much as it pains people sometimes, and I say this to my clients, I'll say this to myself, sometimes you got to be the one that does the right thing. As much as you might be like, oh, why doesn't this other person ask me the question? Or why don't they behave the way I want them to behave or whatever, right? So, okay, it's my role, it's my cross to bear, whatever it is. I'm going to ask the intelligent questions, elicit the answers, soothe the savage beast. And eventually, over time, when the conflict has been reduced, that's when you can have a real conversation. You're not going to resolve this in the heat of it. Can be something resolved in the future with something completely tangential that brings like, hey, why don't we go see a financial planner together? Right? It's a total non-threatening thing because I want us to plan our financial future together. Right? So who cares who makes more? Right? We collectively make this. See how you're kind of bringing people together rather than
Right.
wedging them apart. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think where she goes with it, right, is she says, "Do you not think women should make more than their husbands?" And I think that was an attack. I'm happy that I have a professional negotiator backing me because I would say that wasn't really a question. He says,
Hmm.
"Don't try to make me out to be a sexist." And without batting an eye, I responded with, "Well, are you?" Now, I agree with you. It sounds like she is a little bit more level-headed and mature. I think she's picking up on it, but the issue is her communication here isn't really nonviolent. It is an
Yeah.
attack. And you know, throwing out these terms sexist, racist, and I'll be the first to sit here and I've said this before, I think any reasonable person comes to realize like I have sexist impulses, I have racist impulses. Now, it's not because I'm sitting here reading racist literature, it's because I grew up watching Cops. It's in the air,
Right.
it's in culture. So,
Right.
likewise, I don't think that's exactly what this person is objecting to, what this male is objecting to. I think what he's more saying is not sexism per se, though that might be where it goes, but rather that
Right.
he feels an obligation, a duty to be the provider, which is
Right.
what, if I'm going to say what the kind of the male cross to bear is, that we
Right.
do have that pressure. And that is something that is ultimately on him, of course. But I feel like she's not really getting that. She's not really hearing it. Now,
Right.
it's going to be hard to defend this guy because he then flips out, and that's not great. He starts saying he couldn't believe I was accusing him of being a sexist when I know him. She says I wasn't trying to say he was a sexist, which we can give her the benefit of the doubt, but she wasn't treading as carefully as we needed her to tread.
Right.
This is a line that I don't like, Joe. Maybe I'm being too nitpicky, but she says, "I was trying to get him to see how bad this looked." Now,
Right.
to this is a thing people will do where I'm like, "Looked?" I mean, I'm sorry. Are we being broadcast right now? Like,
Mhm.
are we here together to work on this? We're against the problem together, but you're wondering how this looks. It's very
Right.
strange
Right.
to me. It is not relevant to invoke the optics of what we're going through. We're on a team. So what, you gonna record me and put it online? It's almost like, I mean, I don't hear it as threatening here, but I hear it
No.
as a lack of presence. Instead of being here and listening to this guy and trying to really understand the situation, you're almost already externalizing and going elsewhere with it, which is not relevant to our conflict.
Yeah, assigning blame is a sign of an argument because you're trying to win. You're not focused on the solution. You're not focused on moving past it, on finding the common ground. You're trying to land your punches. And those kinds of statements, obviously, they can inflame conversations and extend them because you're trying to assign blame and trying to get somebody to admit something that you're right, they're wrong. And one thing I can tell you as someone who's been married 20, coming up on 21 years, there are a lot of situations that you run into over the years where you could be 100% in the right. However, in the interest of marital harmony, and I want to be very clear, this goes both ways. My wife does it for me and I do it for her. It's not just one way, is that you just move on, right? And in our house, again, boy, little nuggets of joy here. I call it the hard right turn.
Yeah.
And we've had situations where we'll be out at a restaurant with some friends and we'll get in some weird argument um, about X, Y, or Z. And like as we're snipping, walking up the thing up to the hostess stand, and then I'll just grab my wife's hand and I'll like squeeze it and I'll be like, hard right turn, and she'll squeeze back and we'll go back into the dinner, and we're like right back in where we should be, as connected at the hip and having a great time, because that argument's going to color our relationship, and then it's going to, in this example, ruin our good time with these friends we haven't seen in 6 months at this nice new restaurant we're trying, right? It's like, what's more important, being right or being happy? And in my world, it's always being happy, because unless someone's really kind of, constantly manipulating you and doing things, and you're like, but more often than not, a situation like this is a right versus happy. It's like, well, yeah, we might need to address this, but in the moment, okay, let's just get our relationship back on track so we can have this difficult conversation.
I like that. I like that a lot. Hard right turn. We're grabbing phrases like crazy today.
We're going to post them on the board here.
Dr. Monkey Lady writes, NTA, he needs to deal with his fragile masculinity. It is sexist to have that kind of reaction to your partner making more than you. I'm finding that to be a
Yeah.
little too harsh. Toxic,
Yep.
I'm comfortable with. It is a little
Okay.
toxic.
Yep.
And I,
Sure.
I think, as you and I have discussed, we're kind of inbuilt with a little toxicity. That's just
Sure.
part of it. Part of life is learning to create space between your reaction and another person and processing your own reactions. That doesn't mean you're always going to have the perfect reaction every time. I mean, that is a fantasy.
Hmm.
Stoopy, the top dissenting comment, writes, "No asshole here. No assholes here. He's likely hurt that he's 10 years out of college and making less than you. He probably also realizes that his feelings make him appear sexist and is uncomfortable with that. You're also justified in calling out some of his internalized sexism. He should be happy for you. Edit, changing it to NTA because husband is an actual sexist pig." I'm guessing that we got more details and learned bad things about OP. That's Reddit for you.
Absolutely. That's the thing. We call those black swan events in our world. It's that one, yep, it's got a name, right? It's, you see a situation and everything looks like, sure, everything appears to be as it should be. And then, as you would guess, black swans are extremely rare. And into your situation floats in a black swan, and you're like, oh, okay. And so it sounds like someone got some info in there that just really flipped the apple cart that we aren't privy to.
I found it here. It says, "We started dating when I was 19 and he was 25. Some people thought it was weird, but everyone also thought I was mature for my age. I guess now
Yeah.
that I think of it, he was pretty controlling when I was in college about who I could hang out with. I think he always felt like he had to look out for me because I couldn't do it myself. So maybe it's just really a control thing in general, unrelated to sex, but IDK." Now,
Yeah.
wasn't really I was trying to put up a little defense for this husband. Of course, I'm never really gonna look at a 31-year-old who is acting this way as, it's not appropriate, bro. Like, you need to do the work. He should have reflected. I think,
Yeah.
when I have a reaction like this, I want to understand it. I wanna contain it, break it down, think about what am I reacting to, because I don't wanna get in this position again. I don't wanna have an unideal reaction either.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody. And certainly that's good information to have. And that really comes from that protective provider role. That's a very stereotypical male societal expectation, right? Protect, provide, those kinds of things. When you think about the military or the fire department, or all those professions are typically male. Not that women can't do them, but they're typically male. And that kind of goes into that whole, if you want to talk nature nurture and you really want to lose your marbles, right? You can say, well, our DNA is hard coded that we are the hunter
Yeah.
gatherers. Ooh, man. Right. So, like, you could really make that argument as well, that somewhere buried deep down in your programming is this whole need to provide and protect. And if you're not fulfilling that role, well, then, you're not doing your job. So, this guy, I mean, it sounds like he's a bit protective, but you have to we don't know his psyche enough to know, is he protective because he's just concerned, or is he manipulative? And that's the difference, right? That's the difference between if he is or he isn't, in my book, is depends on what kind of game he's playing. If it's a genuine reaction and he wants to get better and he wants to be more enlightened, I'm going to cut him some slack. But if it's truly, I'm going to just try to put the screws down here and control you the best I can, I'm not so good about that. Not so keen on that.
For me, the flip out has me leaning a certain way. I'm not going to say here and say I've never flipped out in my life, but I take it very
Right.
seriously whenever I do because, well, it's embarrassing of, of many
Hmm.
things. And I think what I would have liked to have seen him here do is not wait until June till she brings it up again, which by the way, she didn't,
Right.
right? So she knew it was touchy. And for him to have at some point, hopefully that January, come to her and said,
Right.
"Hey, I just want you to know, I'm gonna be honest with you, my ego was very threatened at you making more money than
Right.
me. My father, made more than my mother, and I always pictured my life going that way, and it's
Yep.
something that I have to work on. But of course, when I sit here and I sober up from that reaction, babe, I'm so happy that we're gonna have more money, and I celebrate you. And actually, the way you can help me maybe is tell me ways that you can make it feel like I am providing for you. What can
Right.
I do to
Right.
do that?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah. We all have roles, right? Partnership is all about divide and conquer. It's not about who does what, right? It's what can we all do together, row in the same direction, right?
absolutely. AITA for asking my husband if he is a sexist. For me on this one, I think there is a big age gap here. She's 24. She's very young, and he's not doing the self work. I don't think the way she handled this conflict was great, but
Hmm.
I didn't really see any reflection from him. And the flip out for me is very hard to deal with. I'm struggling here because I feel like the listeners are gonna want me to spare her totally, but I'm gonna be honest and say, look, she is young, so I definitely think he's more of an asshole. But I actually am at a soft everyone sucks here because I do feel like she was. We've talked about this, Joe. Calling someone a sexist, calling someone a racist, calling someone a bigot. It's name calling.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's not
tough.
appropriate in a conflict, and so for that, I am gonna say ESH, mostly him, because he's 31 and controlling and a nightmare, but she didn't handle the conflict as cleanly as I would have liked.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. It's a tough one, right? Because you just want the kids to get along, right? You just want them to understand, and hopefully, if it becomes a teachable moment, and hope they're doing great today, it's one of those situations where yeah, everybody could have handled it better, and I would happily change my score or my grade if after the fact we found out that they both had a good heart to heart, cleared the air, and promised to do better. Then you got me. Then I'm on board,
I
right?
know.
Nobody's here. NaH on that one.
Well, hopefully she broke up with him or he got therapy, but you never know with these things. All right,
Yep.
on to our second situation. Here we go. AITA for not backing up my husband when he ordered our adult daughter to go to her room. Sienna
Mhm.
and I have always been very close. We're a lot alike, got similar interests. We're also both very stubborn. I've always been okay with her voicing her opinions, challenging me, etc. I don't want her to blindly respect me. We occasionally have a tiny tiff or whatever, but we always make up quickly. Husband grew up in a very different household. He never would question his mother, even as an adult. They never had any arguments and rather just kept everything bottled in. It's been very hard for him to accept that it's healthy for Sienna to voice her opinions and to not blindly accept our word. Before anyone asks, he has refused therapy and I don't see him budging. My husband often gets irritated when Sienna and I have a disagreement, telling us both to stop. He doesn't want to hear it. I've told him before, this is healthy communication. Sienna doesn't speak to him that way out of respect, knowing he doesn't want to have that kind of dynamic. So it shouldn't matter if she does it with me. Again, we've had several discussions with him about respecting our relationship and how it works. Also, keep in mind, Sienna and I are not arguing heavily every day. We may just have a minor disagreement or we'll roll our eyes at one another, joke around a few times a week. Well, last night we sat down for dinner. Sienna was in a bit of a mood as she had a bad day at school. She had already told me she didn't want to talk about it, so I was respecting her. She ended up getting a little snappy when I asked her if she wanted to do something. I just told her there were better ways of answering than that, and she rolled her eyes. I was ready to let it go, and my husband jumped in and told Sienna to go to her room for, quote, being disrespectful. She said she's an adult, and he said, well, she lives rent free in his house, so she needs to listen. I told him that I didn't mind, and he said that he didn't want to hear this attitude. I asked him to leave the table with me, and we went in the other room. I once again pointed out that I didn't mind Sienna being a little short, as I get why. I also said I know she and I will discuss it later, and she'll apologize. We all have bad days. He said he's tired of hearing us squabble and her talking to me like this. I said I'm tired of him trying to control my relationship with her. By his own
Right.
admission, Sienna won't talk to him that way, so why does it matter? I said Sienna wasn't going to her room unless she wanted to. End of discussion. In the end, my husband went up to our room. He hasn't spoken to me since, and things are tense. AITA.
Wow. Well, that's a classic case of respect is earned, not given, right? And you can't coerce people into respecting you. It's done through behavior. And it sounds like he has an expectation. Maybe it's embedded from his childhood or the way he was raised, that respect is something that is just blindly given without questioning. And now he's running into a bit of a difference of opinion, it sounds like, with his wife and Sienna here. So I could see why this is causing some conflict at home.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I had a friend like this, could not witness conflict, could not witness disagreement, thought that it was the end of the world. He's like, I don't understand why you
Mhm.
guys are so mad at each other. I'm like, we're not mad. We're just two adults who are
Mhm.
disagreeing. It's not super fun, but we're not like angry. It wasn't even emotional. It was just conflict. Yeah, I guess I mean, my first kind of question for you is, we didn't really talk about this, but to me, there's a gap here, right? It's their adult daughter.
Right.
Yeah, it's their adult daughter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I almost thought it was her daughter, but no, it's their daughter.
Right.
But typically, moms tend to be close to their daughters. Sons tend to be close to their sons. I think that's reasonable. But yeah, I'm curious. This is almost like she's an adult now, so she has separate relationships. But yeah, I'm wondering, mixed parenting styles. Is this a problem that we're
Yeah.
running into in your line of work?
100%. Absolutely. And that is another main reason, especially with parenting plans. Now you've got people, they're going to have the kids at their house, say 50% of the time. And one party is trying to micromanage their parenting style with the other parent. And meanwhile, to that, I say, how lucky that your kids get two separate influences and can see the wide swath of parenting styles and communication styles and ways that you eat or that you clean your house or what or don't, whatever it is. This is a situation, it seems, where he has a my way or the highway vibe, right? It's like if you
Yeah.
were raised to not question authority, he now fancies himself the authority. And why are you questioning me?
Oh,
Meanwhile, it sounds like wife and Sienna are kind of cut from the same cloth. And if they don't mind it, hey, there's no issue in my book here. They sound like, they've got a good working relationship, the mother and the daughter. And it sounds like it sounds with the eye rolling is kind of a bit of sarcasm, right? It's a bit of nonverbal communication, and it's snarky in a way, but it's probably better than someone screaming at you like, why are you being such a jerk, or I hate you, or something like that. It's a way people are blowing off steam, right? So
right.
I guess that's a situation where, and we're all raised in these products of our environments and our parents. And so this guy sounds like he comes from a very strict disciplinarian, quiet house, and the wife, not so much.
Yeah, I think we're probably gonna really align here that this guy is very rigid. He's not
Mhm.
really, I don't think he's helping the situation at all. He's kind of very stuck in his ways, as you put perfectly, my way or the highway. But to slightly see his side, I have run into this, so I'm curious for your thoughts. My parents always followed this, even if it did get reduced by my dad to go ask your mother. But they present it as a unified force. That's in the
Yeah,
lore, a parenting lore. Do you have any opinions on that? Because that is
right.
kind of what he's saying, right? Or what she's guilty about.
Yeah, exactly. It's agree in public and disagree in private. In that case, kids are amazing at finding the seam, right? They're amazing at finding the gap or the weak link. They're going to always go ask,
Right.
like, and growing up, like my dad, it was like I was like, Dad, can I have ice cream for dinner? He's sure, why not? My mom is like, what? So why not? Let him have ice cream if that's what he wants. And can I put ice cream in my cereal? Sure, why not? Like, it didn't matter. That's the key here, is that you've got to at least have some unified front. And in that case, the daughter is noticing she can split the difference, right? She can see exploit the conflict between the parents. And that's, unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. Like, when you see that, immediately it's our natural instinct. We're like water. We take the path of least resistance. We're just going to go down the stream and we're going to just find our way. And that's what in this case Sienna is doing. She's figuring that, well, mom lets me argue. I can keep arguing. I don't have to listen to dad because mom doesn't support dad. And so I've got somebody on my side. I've got a protector. I'm going to take advantage of that. And that's unfortunate because the relationship, the marital relationship is in trouble. That's definitely That's definitely an issue. And the fact that he doesn't want to go to therapy, not that, again, that's sort of dovetails nicely with what we're hearing about this guy, right? If he grows up in this traditional strict household, you don't need therapy, man up, be a man. You don't talk about your feelings, right? No, it's not therapy because you're bad or wrong or you're broken and you need fixing. It's a safe space to communicate that how could we be better parents or how could we be better spouses, right? So I think this is a situation where he's being rigid, he's not being flexible, and he's also not taking he's got no inkling of maybe there is a different way than my highway.
One highway, he says. Yeah,
Yeah, right, exactly.
and I think, I mean, you would know much more about this than me, but I have a theory that, people do tend to become more rigid. I mean, I see it in myself, unfortunately. I'm like, as a 20-year-old, as a 25-year-old, like now, I'm like, I'm probably not going to radically change from who I am.
Mhm.
I try to maintain growth, but it's something I've noticed, the older people get, the more fixed they tend to be in their behaviors. So as much as I'd like to say this guy should get therapy, and of course he should, I don't think he's going to. But wouldn't a very reasonable solution here for them, but also for him to say, like, look, why don't when Sienna and I are getting into it, why don't you go to another room? Or how about we go to another room and try, is that a
Yeah.
compromise you think has any weight to it?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because you're not telling them they can't do something. You're just explaining now where we're going with this though. Here's the trick, Danny, is that would require this guy to have some emotional intelligence because it could his only explanation is coercion, right? It's like you have to do this. Well, nobody has to do anything except die, right? It's like about it. And so this guy, what he doesn't realize is he would really get far if he just gave one inkling of emotion by saying, it really upsets me to see you two argue like that. I don't understand it. So I'm not telling you you can't argue, but could you do it in another room? That seems like a very reasonable thing to say, right? And this goes to what we've been talking about. We even talked about in our last one is that you don't know much about this guy. Maybe this guy's parents argued in front of him all the time, right? Maybe he was hit as a child, right? Like
Yeah.
I grew up in an era, right? Like now, thankfully, my parents weren't big on this, but man, I had friends like being older than you. They got a whooping. The dad took the belt off, and like if you did that now, you'd be in jail, right? But back growing up when I grew up in the 80s, it was like that wasn't unusual for somebody to get a spanking, like,
Yeah.
and so maybe this guy grew up in that household and the mother and daughter, he just never shared that because he's not an open book. He's not in touch with those emotions. Maybe he suppressed it. And that's a great example of what we were talking about earlier, where you never know what's going on for somebody. And by dismissing and discounting what they're feeling or saying, you got to look for the position behind the position. And in this case, there could be a myriad of things as to why he's reacting the way he is.
What you said, I think, shows a lot of understanding, a lot of empathy. You don't know. I mean, honestly, I think it pretty much it's pretty axiomatic here that, he's kept everything bottled in. He grew up in
Yeah.
a very different household where mother was never questioned. So this man has been reading from the Bible of my way or the highway his entire life.
Yep.
And you know, even though we agree he's rigid, he's difficult, ostensibly, this guy isn't a total piece of shit. And it does make me think that this maybe is a little bit of a choose your battles. It's like, well, if we're going to be here, Sienna, I love you. We have our dynamic. Let's just keep it away from dad. If we're going to be huffy, why don't we keep it away? Because
Right.
otherwise he's a good dad. I'm giving him that for free, but I don't think
Sure.
that's crazy.
Right. Yeah, she's living rent free at home, so he is. Hey, that didn't say you're 18, get out of my house, right? And go sleep in a bus shelter, right? So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and that could, and we know people like that, right? We all have friends, or we've heard stories of that stuff. I've had friends who their parents said, you either go to college or you go get a job and you're out, and some folks I've had friends who have just left home at 16, 17, and, lived with their friend and finished high school. And so you have to kind of, like you said, this is a lot of what we were just talking about. This is transitional. There's a lot of time right now. We're in such a weird place in this world where roles are shifting, gender identities are shifting, politics are shifting. all of these things are shifting, and it's really hard to keep up sometimes, right? It's really hard to say, like, I'm sorry, like, I only thought there were two pronouns, he and she, right? And so you're like, okay, like if you want to be called something different, I'm on board. Cool.
Sure.
It's all good. Just tell me, how can I support you? Tell me, what do you need from me, right? There's those words. But this guy isn't in that place. He's not in that enlightened place where, and as you said, right, as you get older, you do get more rigid. And it's smart of you to say that. And it's smart of you to recognize that, because when you do, you can push yourself, you can challenge yourself, you can hang out with people who are different than you. You can go to concerts or listen to music that you don't listen to, or watch foreign films, or do whatever it is. Not to say, check me out, I watched this, French tragedy, just going, well, I watch movies about things that blow up in America. That's basically what I like to watch. I like to watch, thrillers and, crime mafia dramas. And so, okay, I'll go watch some foreign film and I'll try and figure it out and I'll walk away and I'll go, okay, well, I'm a better person for it because I'm challenged. I don't understand a word because I don't speak French. There were no subtitles, but I was sad when I left because it was tragic. And so there you go. But you have to be aware of that. This guy doesn't seem to have that intelligence. And it's a shame because therapy could give you that. That's what therapy's for, right? We all think, so weird. I want to share this, and I think listeners will really kind of resonate with this. We're born and our parents spend the first, whatever, 4 or 5 years, teaching us how to walk, how to go to the bathroom, how to use a fork, right? Like all the things that are like, basic. Then in America, we go K through 12 at a minimum. So we spend another 13 years being educated by wonderful people, teachers, God bless teachers, love, love, love teachers, and say, now there's another 13 years. Then some of us go off to college for yet another 4 years. So let's call it the first 21 years of our life. We are being taught things. And then that's it. You're done. You're baked. What? We should be learning constantly. We should be going to school constantly. We should admit to ourselves that we're never baked. We should never stop learning. And if this person or anybody listening's out there, therapy is great for that. It'll teach you something about yourself. Read a book, watch a film, hang out with people who aren't like you. Go talk to somebody on the different side of the political aisle, right? The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to learn something. And I just, that's what fascinates me, is that in this situation, if this guy was just willing to take one little blink and go, how come they argue all the time? I wonder why I think the way I do, or I wonder why then maybe that would be a moment of enlightenment that could open the door to learning. That's what's kind of, I think, missing.
I love it. I love it. Curiosity, wonder. There's so many roads that I want to go down, but we are, unfortunately, I am out of time today. But Joe, thank you so much for joining me. AITA for not backing up my husband when he ordered our adult daughter go to her room. I I I gave the other man a lot of credit, but I'm sorry. This my way or the highway is a very tough philosophy for me to
Yeah.
not. You're an asshole. That's what an asshole is, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
exactly. Yep.
saying
And not willing to learn. If you said I'm difficult but willing to learn, but yeah, sorry. Yeah,
amen.
no
NTA and
bueno.
he is. Joe, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey,
Thanks for sharing your insights. Feel free to plug away.
absolutely. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, visit us at equitablemediation.com if you're in the market for divorce mediation services. We practice around the United States, in multiple states. And even if you do know somebody, who needs that, our website's a great place. So equitablemediation.com, and lots of free resources up there, and even ones on how to negotiate communication. So not even if you're not getting a divorce, you can learn something.
We've all learned so much. Look, I'm already planning the next app. I want to have your wife on. So thanks again for your
Nice.
time today. And
My
if any of you
pleasure.
guys are getting divorced, I mean, this is the guy. This is the guy. All right,
here.
Joe.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
All right, man.